The moon is behind them. The compass is spinning. The hydraulics are dead. And the only thing between 10 men and the North Sea is a second lieutenant with a wristwatch and a slide rule he can barely see. He has 28 minutes of fuel. No radio, no landmarks, and one chance to find an island he's never seen in daylight. February 1945. The air over northern Germany smells like cordite and cold aluminum. 500 bombers are carving through the night, stacked in formations so tight you can see the exhaust glow from the bomber beside you. The target is a rail junction near Magdeburg. The flak is moderate. The night fighters are late. For most crews, this is a milk run, but milk runs end when the mission does. And for one B-17 crew from the 398th Bombardment Group, the mission is about to become something else entirely. The bomber is called Lucky 13. She's a G model, matte olive drab with kill marks stenciled below the cockpit. Her pilot is Captain Frank Becker, a farm kid from Iowa with 200 hours of combat time. Her navigator is Second Lieutenant Harold Webb, 23 years old, formerly a surveyor from Oregon. Webb is quiet, methodical, and obsessive about calculations. His crewmates joke that he checks his math twice, even when ordering breakfast. Tonight, he will need that obsession. The bombing run goes clean. Payload delivered. Formation intact. They bank west toward the coast, engines droning in the thin air at 18,000 feet. Below them, the German countryside is invisible beneath cloud cover. Above them, stars glitter like broken glass. Then the first engine quits. Number 3, the propeller windmills, then feathers. Becker compensates, trimming the aircraft to keep her level. It's not catastrophic. B-17s are built to fly on 3 engines. The crew stays calm. They've trained for this. Then number 4 goes. The starboard wing goes heavy. Becker fights the yoke. The airspeed drops. They begin to lose altitude, slow and inexorable, like a stone sinking through water. Webb looks up from his charts. The instrument panel flickers. The electrical system is faltering. The intercom crackles with static, then goes silent. They are alone now. No radio contact, no formation to follow. Just 10 men in a machine that is quietly dying. Becker's voice comes through the hardwired backup line. He tells Webb they need a heading. They need it now, and they need it to be perfect. Because if they go down in occupied Europe, they won't survive the night. If this history matters to you, tap like and subscribe. Harold Webb was never supposed to be a navigator. He wanted to be a pilot. But the Army Air Forces had other plans. In the spring of 1943, during his evaluation at Santa Ana, California, the instructors noticed something. Webb didn't just memorize navigation tables, he understood them. He could calculate drift angles in his head while other cadets were still fumbling with their plotters. So they made him a navigator. He resented it at first. Navigators didn't get the glory. They sat in cramped compartments with charts and compasses, invisible to everyone except when something went wrong. But Webb was good at invisible work. Before the war, he'd spent 2 years surveying timberland in the Cascade Range, walking transects through forests where a wrong bearing could leave you lost for days. He learned to trust his instruments. He learned to double-check. And he learned that in navigation, there are no small mistakes, only mistakes that kill you now and mistakes that kill you later. At navigation school in San Marcos, Texas, Webb excelled. He could dead-reckon across featureless deserts. He could shoot star fixes in turbulence. His instructors called him precise. His classmates called him paranoid. Webb didn't care. He knew the difference between confidence and accuracy. He arrived in England in October 1944, assigned to the 398th Bombardment Group at Nut Hampstead. The base was a grid of Nissen huts and concrete runways carved into the wet clay of Hertfordshire. The bombers took off before dawn and returned after dark, if they returned at all. Webb flew his first mission in November, then his second, then his 10th. He learned the rhythms of combat navigation, the pre-flight briefing, the cluster of checkpoints, the frantic scribbling as flak threw the aircraft off course. He learned to navigate by dead reckoning when clouds obscured the ground, by pilotage when the clouds broke, and by celestial fixes when night fell and the stars emerged. He learned that the North Sea was the most dangerous part of every mission, not because of fighters or flak, but because it was featureless. No roads, no rivers, no towns, just 200 miles of black water, and if you miscalculated by even 5 degrees, you'd miss England entirely and run out of fuel over the Atlantic. Webb never miscalculated, not once. His pilot trusted him. His crew trusted him. And tonight, over Germany, with 2 engines dead and the electrical system failing, that trust is about to be tested in a way no training manual ever prepared him for. The problem is not theoretical. It is immediate, mechanical, and compounding. With 2 engines out on the same wing, Lucky 13 is asymmetric. She wants to spiral. Becker is using full rudder trim just to keep her straight. The airspeed is down to 130 knots. The altitude is dropping 300 feet per minute. They will not make it to 18,000 feet. They will not make it to 10,000. They are descending into the cloud deck, and once they enter it, they will lose all visual reference. No horizon, no ground, no stars, and no compass. The master compass, driven by electrical gyros, has failed. The backup magnetic compass is spinning uselessly, influenced by the metal mass of the bomber itself and the violent maneuvering Becker is doing just to stay airborne. Webb tries to correct for deviation, but the needle swings 20 degrees in one direction, then 30 in the other. It is worse than useless. It is deceptive. Webb does the math. They are roughly 280 miles from the English coast. At their current airspeed and descent rate, they have maybe 40 minutes of flying time before they're at wave height. They need a heading, west-northwest, roughly 270 degrees. But without a compass, there is no heading. There is only guesswork, and guesswork over the North Sea is suicide. Webb looks at his instruments, his plotting board, his charts, his dividers and protractor and slide rule, all of it useless without a reference point. Navigation is the science of knowing where you are and where you're going. Right now, Webb knows neither. The aircraft shudders. The clouds swallow them. The world outside the window becomes a gray void. Webb feels the floor tilt as Becker fights the controls. The bomber is a brick with wings now, falling through the sky in slow motion. He forces himself to breathe, to think. Panic is a navigational error. Fear is a miscalculation. He has been trained to solve problems, not to survive them. Survival is a consequence of solving problems correctly. So he begins to list what he knows. They were over Magdeburg when the engines failed. Bearing 285 degrees, roughly, altitude 18,000 feet. Airspeed 190 knots before the loss of power. Time elapsed since engine failure, 6 minutes. Heading, unknown. Drift, unknown. Position, unknown. He lists what he has: a wristwatch, a slide rule, a sextant, a plotting board, a flashlight with dying batteries, and a small creased booklet of celestial navigation tables he keeps in his jacket pocket. And then he realizes something. The clouds are below them now. They descended into the cloud layer, but they also descended through it. Above them, through the plexiglass dome of the navigator's station, the sky is clear, the stars are visible, and so is the moon. Webb's pulse steadies. Celestial navigation. It's slow, it's cumbersome. It requires altitude, stable flight, and time. They have none of those things, but it's the only tool he has left. He unclips his seatbelt and reaches for the sextant. Celestial navigation is a 19th-century solution to a 20th-century war. It requires you to measure the angle between a celestial body and the horizon, then use tables and math to calculate your position. In peacetime, on a stable ship, it takes 10 minutes. In a crippled bomber at night, with no horizon and no electrical instruments, it should be impossible. Webb knows this, but he also knows that impossible is a word used by people who stop calculating too early. He braces himself against the navigator's table and lifts the sextant to his eye. The moon is nearly full, low in the eastern sky. He tries to measure its altitude, but the aircraft is yawing, pitching, shaking. The crosshairs in the sextant swing wildly. He can't get a steady reading. He tries again and again. On the fourth attempt, he holds his breath, times the motion of the aircraft, and captures a reading between two lurches. 38 degrees. Maybe. He writes it down, knowing it could be off by 2 or 3 degrees. In celestial navigation, a 3-degree error equals 180 miles of position error. But something is better than nothing. Next, he needs the exact time. Celestial navigation depends on Greenwich Mean Time because the position of celestial bodies changes every second. His chronometer, electrical, is dead, but his wristwatch, a 17-joule Elgin his father gave him before he shipped out, is still ticking. He wound it this morning. He checked it against the briefing room clock before takeoff. It should be accurate to within 30 seconds. Should be. 30 seconds of error equals 7.5 degrees of longitude, another potential 100 miles of drift. Webb writes down the time, 22:37. He opens his celestial tables and begins to calculate. Moonrise position, declination, Greenwich hour angle. His slide rule clicks and scrapes in the dark. His handwriting is cramped, shaky. The flashlight flickers. 10 minutes later, he has a position, approximate, rough. But a position. They are not over Magdeburg. The wind has pushed them north. They are somewhere over the Frisian coast, maybe 50 miles from the sea. If he's right, if his sextant angle was accurate, if his watch is still synchronized, if the tables are correct, if the moon's position hasn't shifted too much in the minutes since he took the reading. If. He plots a heading on his chart, 265 degrees, almost due west. He checks it again. Then a third time. Then he crawls forward through the fuselage to the cockpit and taps Becker on the shoulder. Becker looks at him. Webb holds up the chart and points to the heading. Becker doesn't ask questions. He banks the aircraft, fighting the asymmetric thrust, and steadies on 265 degrees. The moon slides to their right. The clouds below them stretch to the horizon, faintly lit by starlight. They fly west, into the unknown, on the strength of one sextant shot and a wristwatch. For the first 20 minutes, there is no way to know if the heading is correct. The clouds are unbroken. There are no landmarks, no lights, no reference points, just the steady drone of 2 remaining engines and the slow, relentless descent. Webb takes another sextant shot, then another. Each one is a small agony of concentration. The moon is setting now, lower in the sky, harder to measure. The aircraft is shaking more as the airspeed drops. But he forces himself to take the readings, to calculate, to plot. Each fix confirms the heading, 265 degrees, west by northwest, toward England, toward home, but the fuel is running out. The engines are coughing, starved of gasoline. The altimeter reads 4,000 feet, then 3,000. Becker tells the crew to prepare for ditching. The waist gunners throw out everything they can, ammunition, guns, flak vests, anything to lighten the load. The radio operator cranks the manual generator, trying to send a distress signal, but there is no response. They are alone. Webb knows this. He also knows that if they ditch in the North Sea at night in February, they will die of hypothermia in less than 10 minutes. He goes back to the Navigator's station. He takes one more sextant shot. The moon is almost on the horizon now, a thin crescent. He measures its angle, calculates, plots, and then he sees it. Through a gap in the clouds, a flicker of light, faint, distant, but unmistakable. Land. He shouts into the intercom. The crew looks out the windows. The clouds are breaking. Below them, a dark smudge of coastline. Then a runway. Then lights. An airfield. Becker doesn't hesitate. He drops the landing gear manually, using the emergency crank. The flaps are frozen, so he comes in fast and steep. The airfield is small, unfamiliar. Not their home base. But it's England. It's solid ground. Lucky 13 hits the runway hard, bounces once and skids to a stop. The engines cough and die. The silence is immense. The crew sits for a moment, not speaking. Then the pilot opens the hatch. Cold air rushes in. They climb out onto the tarmac, legs shaking, and realize they have no idea where they are. A jeep approaches. A British flight officer steps out, looks at the bomber, and asks where they came from. Becker doesn't know. Webb steps forward. He pulls out his chart, traces the route, and tells the officer they flew 280 miles on celestial navigation with no compass, no radio, and no electrical instruments. The officer looks at Webb, then at the chart, then back at Webb. He says they've landed at RAF Woodbridge, an emergency field on the Suffolk coast. He says they're the third aircraft to make it there tonight, but they're the only one that navigated by the stars. Webb nods. He folds the chart. His hands are still shaking. The story of Harold Webb's navigation spread quietly through the 8th Air Force, not as propaganda, not as legend, but as a case study, a proof of concept, a reminder that when systems fail, human ingenuity does not. Celestial navigation was already part of bomber training, but after incidents like Webb's, the emphasis shifted. Navigators were drilled harder on sextant use. Backup procedures were refined. The assumption that electrical systems would always function was quietly discarded. The impact was measurable. In the final months of the war, as bomber raids intensified and losses mounted, the percentage of crews successfully returning from missions with partial instrument failure increased. Not dramatically, but enough. Records from the 398th Bombardment Group show that between February and May 1945, at least 6 crews used celestial navigation to return to England after losing their primary navigation instruments. 3 of those crews credited Webb's example. One navigator, in his post-mission report, wrote that he'd heard about the moonlight fix and practiced sextant shots on every mission afterward. When his compass failed over the Baltic, he knew exactly what to do. He made it home. Webb himself flew 18 more missions after that night. He never spoke much about the navigation. When asked, he said he did what he was trained to do. He checked his math. He trusted his instruments, and he got lucky. But luck is what you call skill when you don't understand the preparation behind it. Webb didn't guess. He calculated. He didn't hope. He executed. And in doing so, he demonstrated a principle that extends far beyond navigation, that competence, even in the smallest details, can mean the difference between survival and oblivion. The moon doesn't care if you're lost. The sea doesn't care if you're afraid. The only thing that matters is whether you can solve the problem in front of you with the tools you have. Webb had a sextant, a wristwatch, and a slide rule, and that was enough. After the war, Harold Webb returned to Oregon. He worked as a civil engineer, surveying roads and bridges in the same forests where he'd once walked transects as a young man. He married, he raised 2 children, he rarely talked about the war. But in his study, on a small shelf above his desk, he kept 3 things: a battered slide rule, a wristwatch with a scratched crystal, and a sextant in a wooden case. His son, years later, asked him why he kept them. Webb said they were the tools that brought him home, not just once, but every time, because tools, properly used, are not just instruments. They are decisions made visible. They are the proof that reason and preparation can hold back chaos, if only for a little while. In 1982, Webb was invited to speak at a navigation conference in Seattle. He was 60 years old, gray-haired, still precise in his speech. He told the story of that February night. He showed the sextant. He explained the math. And then he said something that the attendees remembered long after the conference ended. He said that navigation is not about knowing where you are. It's about knowing what to do when you don't. Harold Webb died in 1996. His obituary mentioned his service as a navigator in the 8th Air Force. It mentioned his work as an engineer. It did not mention the moon, or the watch, or the 280 miles he flew in the dark with nothing but geometry and faith. But the men who flew with him remembered, and the navigators who came after him learned, not from headlines or medals, but from the quiet insistence that skill and discipline matter, that when the compass spins and the stars are all you have, you can still find your way home, because the sky does not forgive. But it does not lie either, and if you know how to read it, if you can hold your hands steady and your mind clear, it will guide you, not because you are lucky, but because you are ready. And sometimes, in war, readiness is the only miracle you need.